Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 250 of EYE on Sci-Fi Podcast, the podcast where we share with you terrific indie science fiction and fantasy, online short films, web series, and other closely related media. We also, on occasion, have conversations with the talented creators and filmmakers who are producing outstanding indie speculative work. Thank you for joining me on our special 250th episode, and we have a very special guest. Tony Tellado is someone who I consider to be an OG of podcasting. Tony launched his podcast, formerly known as Sci-Fi Talk, back in 2005. That is before the first iPhone was introduced to the market. Since then, Tony has covered speculative genres in all media and has interviewed A-list actors, directors, producers, composers, as well as costume designers, special and visual effects artists, and more throughout his long and illustrious career in journalism. I began listening to Sci-Fi Talk podcast back in 2008, and since then I have had the pleasure of becoming acquainted with Tony. In fact, I consider Tony a mentor in my own podcasting journey, so I was thrilled when he agreed to sit down and chat with me on our 250th episode. He discusses his career and also the exciting rebrand of his podcast, now known as Exploring Humanity Through Sci-Fi, and I can't think of a more apropos name because that's exactly what Tony has done throughout his journalistic and podcasting career. So without further ado, please enjoy the 250th episode of EYE on Sci-Fi Podcast, featuring long-running podcaster and host of Exploring Humanity Through Sci-Fi, Tony Tellado. Tony Tellado, welcome back to EYE on Sci-Fi Podcast, sir.
Great to be on, Rod. I'm very proud of what you've done with this podcast since 2018, and you have just been killing it every single week.
Coming from you, that means a great deal to me. And for my listeners and my viewers, Tony Tellado is an OG in podcasting. I'm going to have to give you your flowers. I'm sorry. That's what the kids say nowadays. But Tony started his sci-fi podcast. At the time, it was known as Sci-Fi Talk back in 2005.
Yeah.
That predates the iPhone that came out in 2007. Every social media platform, streaming. So it is just remarkable what you have been able to achieve, Tony, with your podcast. And I've told you this before, but we haven't met in person yet, but I consider you a mentor. And I stumbled upon your podcast back in 2008. I really enjoyed your coverage of speculative media.
Yeah.
And so
you.
when I started my podcast, of course, I patterned what I'm doing after you.
Wow.
And so you have been from afar a mentor of mine, an encourager of mine when things, as they do, get difficult and challenging. So I really appreciate what you've done, and I'm so excited for our conversation.
Rod, thank you. I'm very humbled by that. I really, really am. It's nice to hear something like that, and sometimes you kind of work in a bubble and you don't hear that, and it's great to hear that. Thank you again.
Absolutely. So you are the host of, it was formerly known as Sci-Fi Talk, and we're going to get to the rebrand, which is very exciting, that you're undergoing right now with your podcast.
Yeah.
But I always ask my guests, what is it about science fiction and all speculative media, that includes horror and fantasy, that really drew you to that medium and really made you focus that medium as part of your career in podcasting?
Well, it was an impression I had when I was young, watching the classic movies, War of the Worlds, the Universal horror movies, and then the Adventures of Superman on television with the great George Reeves. It all kind of fueled my imagination. And, sci-fi asks that wonderful question, what if? What if this is going on or that is going on? And then as I got older, films that made an impression definitely was Planet of the Apes. Really made an impression on me. The first one. The others were okay, but the new versions are fantastic. I really like what they've done. And a really great cast, performing all the apes and everything. It's just the technology has caught up to it. So those made a big impression on me. And then in high school, I remember reading Jules Verne, H.G. Wells, all those great science fiction classic writers, and that inspired me to dream, and I've had a love for it ever since. And really what fueled it was two things, was the original Twilight Zone and Star Trek, of course. Star Trek, just, that was the one. They asked so many great ethical questions, and also it was a diverse starship with people not only from different races but different worlds working together for a common good, and that was very inspiring.
One of the things that I really appreciated about your podcast when I discovered it is that you interviewed people who really made such impactful contributions to speculative media, but may not have always gotten the spotlight. So you didn't just interview A-list actors that were involved, but also composers, costume designers, authors who wrote books. And so that was very important for you to do that. Can you share why?
Well, there's a lot of people that go into making movies and television, and they have their own creative process that can be a little different from the actors, even the writers or the directors. So I wanted to showcase how they get from point A to point B. A lot of it is you're dealing with people that make the decisions too. And sometimes your creativity can only go so far. So I like the challenge of that and talking to them about that. And also, I'm a sound guy, so for composers, I want to hear how they come up with these sounds. And it's like, hey, how did you do this? And then they'll tell me stories about amazing instrumentation that I never heard of before. Not only just in this country, but around the world. Tibetan bowls and things to make different sounds, and then part of the things I loved was Day the Earth Stood Still. And as I got older, I found out what a theremin was. And that makes that woo sound. And then also the score for Forbidden Planet was all electronic sounds. And I just did a podcast on Forbidden Planet, and I didn't realize that the couple that came up with this actually had to sell the studio on it. And they had a composer to do a conventional score, but he dropped out. So they became the score. And because of union problems, they couldn't be called composers. So they had to call it electronic tonalities instead. So it's kind of like, okay. But we got to hear it. And as I reported in the podcast episode, in 1976, they were at the Worldcon convention. They had a CD or an album of their score, and they signed them for people, and they finally got recognition for what they did. So that's part of it too. You want to tap into other creative avenues of what people are doing. And I just spoke to the production designer for Silo, for example. And for this season, I spoke to the previous one. And coming up, I'll be talking to the visual effects supervisor for Dark Matter. Not Dark Mirror, but Dark Matter that just aired. So, there's a lot of people. And there's a few more that are coming up. It's also Emmy time, and these people should get their due. So I'm doing my part. On that.
You've been doing your part for 20 years now in podcasting. Wow. So that is quite a significant contribution. Wow. And I know I, for one, as a consumer of your podcast, as well as I have the pleasure of getting acquainted with you personally, that really does make an impact, Tony.
Wow.
And During our first conversation, I had asked you a question that many of us who appreciate science fiction have asked. What makes good science fiction? And you said that it must reflect the human condition. All of the other aspects, the visual effects, the set designs, that's the icing on the cake, but the core of the story has to reflect humanity. And so you are right now undergoing a rebrand. And I have to admit, I really love the name Exploring Humanity Through Sci-Fi. I also think your tagline is brilliant, where imagination meets what it means to be human. So share exactly what was the impetus for the rebrand after all this time and what you hope to accomplish with your podcast going forward.
Yeah, every year you kind of brainstorm and see how things are going, and it was like Sci-Fi Talk. It's like, yeah, but there's so much room for interpretation, and there's also so much out there. So you want to have a name where people can read the name and know exactly what your podcast is about. So, what have I been doing all these years? I've been exploring humanity through sci-fi, fantasy, horror, and comics. So it's like, why not just put it in the title? And I got a great tip. It's like, if you were writing a book, how would you title it? And that's how I came up with the name. Yeah. So I did have a little AI help, but it gave me like about 6 or 7 different versions, and that was the one I settled on. And it's like, yeah, that's what I'm doing. It's what I've always been doing, but now it's in the title. And now people, can access it that way. I have noticed a little bit of a bump in downloads. So people are are listening. It's not a tidal wave, but it's more than just a few ripples. So it's good. So yeah, I'm very happy with it. And it's also just changed the way I approach it now, in my questions to people, also in my way of thinking during, just putting episodes together. And now I kind of do a little thing at the end where I said, well, what did we learn? What's this? What's all this about? So I kind of give a little speech, and that was inspired by really the Twilight Zone endings. I'm not comparing myself by any means, but it was inspired by that. How he would kind of wrap up the episode and say, this is what we just saw, and it's not just confined to the Twilight Zone. So it was like I kind of did the same kind of thing, and really. There are a lot of podcasts out, and I wanted to stand out a little more and to let people know that I'm doing something a little different. I love having a good time during an interview, and also I love that people have fun doing what they're doing. But it's like, I hope we can have fun too. But there's a message there, and it's very important, important message, how we define our humanity. I mean, right now people are redefining their sexuality, their very being as to who they are and how it all fits into the world. So it's like it's very timely, I thought, and especially with things like artificial intelligence, that's going to define us probably for the next 20, 30 years. I mean, I'm using it already, and I kind of equate it to kind of a young child who doesn't quite understand everything, so you kind of have to nudge it along, but eventually it will. So it's going to change our lives, and I hope it doesn't make us too lazy either. But time will tell. But that's really the core of it. It was just what I've always been doing, and now it just felt like after I did it, I go, yeah, this is it now. This is where I belong.
Very exciting. So let me ask you this then. Of course, since we last spoke, which was in 2018, streaming has really come into its own, especially given what happened during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so now we have so much speculative content out than we ever have before.
Yeah.
So can you name maybe top 3 television series, science fiction, fantasy, horror that you're enjoying right now?
Well, I'll tell you the Star Trek series, especially Strange New Worlds, is fantastic. Apple TV Plus has an amazing core of series. For All Mankind is a personal favorite of mine, being an old space program kind of buff growing up during that era. I really like that. Dark Matter, which I mentioned, is really intriguing. The whole parallel worlds thing and alternate realities, it's actually gaining steam in science a little bit too. So, although I did interview somebody who didn't believe in alternate universes, but until we can prove otherwise, I'm going to say that it's possibility. Yeah, those come to mind. There's so many. Really, the adaptations, Foundation is really an interesting series. The Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power series, very interesting. And they're spending money on those shows. They're not skimping. In some ways, I think Apple is more of a sci-fi channel than the Sci-Fi Channel.
And who saw that coming?
I didn't.
I think that Apple TV Plus is what the Sci-Fi Channel should have been.
Yes.
And it really has become a go-to destination for not just sci-fi and fantasy, but quality speculative fiction. A show that I recently have gotten into. The pilot episode didn't grab me at first. I thought it was very slow. But now I think it's one of the best shows on television, and that's Severance.
Oh, yes.
And it is amazing what they are doing with that show.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned Foundation is fantastic. I can't wait for that to return.
Yeah.
And Silo is also fantastic as well. So Apple is really doing a bang-up job.
Yeah, I've been blessed to talk to a lot of those folks for the first 2 seasons, and I certainly hope to for season 3. It's Silo is phenomenal. It raises a lot of ethical questions and really about what humanity is, what truth is, and keeping the truth from people, and and essentially impeding their freedom. So it's really fascinating. Great cast from Rebecca, Tim Robbins, all the way down. There's some other actors in there that I wasn't exposed to before that I've been totally thrilled with. And I've spoken to a few of them, and it's been great series. But yeah, if there is one place I would go to for genre entertainment right now, is Apple TV Plus. I mean,
Agreed.
That's the one subscription that every fan should have. Absolutely. Horror-wise, Shudder is doing some great work. They have a lot of independent films as well, which is really cool. That's also by subscription. I mean, Disney has, it has your Star Wars, and some are good. Andor is premiering, and that looks to be another great season coming up.
You also mentioned Star Trek as well.
Yeah.
And I think one of the biggest things that I've really appreciated about the resurgence of science fiction is the return of Star Trek to television on Paramount Plus.
Oh, yeah.
So it has just been so refreshing, especially Strange New Worlds.
Yes.
That's such a fun throwback to the original series.
No question. And then something that's really been cool is the other series are also being streamed now. So people have rediscovered Star Trek Deep Space Nine and Star Trek Voyager. So online you'll see the best captain, Avery Brooks from Deep Space Nine. And it's like, wow, it's like, where were you in 1995 when the show was on? But the fact...
Now, Tony, we have to remember,
they
and
weren't
I'm
born.
dating us, but some of these people
weren't even born.
Right.
But, because of streaming, Voyager and now Prodigy, I mean, Janeway is just blown up as a character. And, speaking to her, she's been totally blown away. There's even like a bust of Janeway in her hometown that people can visit and take selfies with. It's just crazy.
Kate Mulgrew is a phenomenal actor. She always
wonderful.
has been.
Wonderful actor. So, I mean, it's been fantastic. Strange New Worlds, wonderful cast. Really love the people that are on the show. And Ethan is just killing it as Mr. Spock. And then Paul Wesley stepping into Kirk's shoes and putting his own spin. But that's one of the things I told him. I go, it's like, it's familiar to me, but they're different. But I know who these people are. And it's like, that's the sign of a really good actor. doing a great job and really making the character their own, but still staying true to who they are. So,
and giving it a fresh coat of paint for a modern era. I think Anson Mount is fantastic as Christopher Pike.
Totally.
And I keep hoping those of us who are older Star Trek fans, we know a version of how his story ends. But I'm hoping that this series will change that, because I love him. I love his portrayal as Captain Christopher Pike.
Yep.
And it's just, we need more aspiration in science fiction, and Star Trek has always brought that.
Absolutely. It has inspired me pretty much for the last 50 some years, and, from the original series. And I mean, story I've always told was, I lived in Newark and there were riots in 1967. And, maybe rightly so, because things were pretty bad in those days. And I remember watching City on the Edge of Forever. It's just a little thing. Kirk is going to walk on the bridge, but in front of him is an African-American crewman, and, he was somebody that had a position, you could tell. And he walked on board ahead of him, and it was like, oh, wow, doesn't seem like there's a problem. So that really made an impact. And then seeing other, Commodore Stone, who was in court-martial the Commodore of a space colony, space station. So it was like, wow, that made an impression to me as a young man, and saying, if we get through this, I think there's a future here for everybody. And that's one of the things I like to showcase too, is diversity and inclusion. Maybe that's not the fad to some people, but something, you can't ignore it. It's there. It's gonna be there. You can try to wipe it out in history, but it's not going to work. It's just there. And I think if you accept it, it becomes very easy. But if you don't, then I guess your life is miserable because you're so close-minded. But I think it's very important.
It is important. I agree. And we are in very turbulent times again right now. Yeah. And so having shows like Star Trek that portray an optimistic view of the future is critical, especially in times like these, it's pretty bad out here. Yeah. And we live, bottom line, reality is we have always lived in a world filled with diverse people, diverse in terms of cultures, ethnicities, perspectives, religion. And so you can either accept that or not, but that's not going to change the reality of what is. So I'm glad that you addressed that in all of your work, Tony. Yeah. And given the rebrand, can you give us some tidbits about interviews that are coming up that we may be excited for? Can you share any of the plans that you have in the immediate future for the podcast?
Yeah, I'll be talking to Mark Guggenheim next week. He of course ran the Arrowverse. And that's the first thing I'm going to talk to him about. I'm going to thank him for that, because in the crossover that they did, he actually put in his own money to finance that. So
wow.
Yeah, he did. So it was like he put his money where his mouth is. And I have a lot of respect. I was there at the Arrow Roundtable for season 1. I'll never forget it. At New York Comic Con, I was actually there. So wow. I sat next to Stephen Amell, and I had my San Diego Comic Con room card, and it was Arrow. So he goes, oh, I like that. But yeah, I mean, I was there really from the beginnve and I've had a series.
And who would have thought that entire Arrowverse universe that spun from that one show?
So yeah, I mean, I've actually did a whole series of podcasts looking back on the whole Arrowverse, and even had comments at the end from Stephen when it was all over, which was cool. That somebody at San Diego was nice enough to tape for me. So that's coming up. I'll be talking to, she unfortunately was out sick, but I'll hope to talk to her soon, the makeup and hair person for Silo, coming up. And as I said, the visual effects supervisor for Dark Matter is coming up. I spoke to Jeannie Mason from Wandala, great children's series. And just like me, she's from Cuban heritage, and so I kind of connected with her there. There's some Latin music in the pilot episode that you might enjoy, or the second episode, I think. But
Nice.
yeah, it was cool. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot. So yeah, I have John Heller, who is the visual effects for Dark Matter, coming up. I'm also doing a rewind, an old conversation with Greg Grunberg about heroes. That's coming up.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and every Tuesday I do a Trek Tuesday.
Tony, let's talk about that. What is the publishing schedule for Exploring Humanity through Sci-Fi? When can people expect episodes, and how can they subscribe?
Daily. It's really what it amounts to. It's a lot of work, but it is daily. And I do it every day. So essentially, there's new episodes Monday through Friday. Tuesdays are Trek Tuesday. And then the third week of the month is my time capsule, which is kind of like a magazine interview, that podcast that has different interviews.
Love
on
those.
It. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I have that coming up this weekend, this Friday, as a matter of fact. And on weekends, I have bites. Bites are just short interviews, whether they are provided to me or they are mine. I just ran interviews with Michael B. Jordan and also Ryan Coogler, talking about their wonderful movie Sinners, which is on my radar big time. The reviews have been stellar, and the people have turned out for it too. So it's like every time I see those two people working together, something special happens. And this looked like another one. And he assembled a cast that rivals any cast. I would put him up against anybody because they're all good. Omar Mason, I used to watch him in Good Morning Vietnam, and I said, who is this young guy? He is good. And I've been seeing him and kept seeing him and seeing him. And there's a scene that I've been running on my premium podcast, which I'll talk about, and where he wants to be let in. We'll just leave it at that. But that was a cool scene. But yeah, him, I mean, I'm going to butcher her name, so I'm not even going to attempt it. But this is a woman I saw in Lovecraft, and she's a singer too, and surprised me that she's actually English. But she is in the movie, and she plays strong women always. And, there's so many to go through. Delroy Lindo, an actor who I've admired, and, he's in it. And it's just a stellar cast. And, it's nice to kind of come at horror from that direction too, And there's music involved too. Some rich music in there. So, man, that's a recipe for success as far as I'm concerned.
Sinners is getting rave reviews. As a matter of fact, now I no longer go to see movies in theaters. Yeah. I haven't even since before the pandemic. Yeah. I just watch films on streaming. Mm-hmm. But I want to support Ryan because the last film I did see in theaters was Black Panther, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. He is a director of exciting and singular vision. He is truly a talent. Mm-hmm. And so I think I'm going to go see Sinners in theaters in IMAX just to support him and enjoy that experience.
Yeah.
So, Tony, you mentioned that you provide new episodes daily. I also, too, before I forget, are we able to access your older episodes?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, on my feed, there's over 1,000 episodes. So
wow.
The way you can access them there through my feed, and basically if you go to my site on Podbean, if you look me up on Podbean, which is who hosts my podcast, you can subscribe right there. But also really where most people find me is on Apple, or Apple Podcast. You can subscribe there, and really anywhere you get your podcast, you can subscribe and start listening to me. And I'm also on YouTube now. The episodes are there. Your episode is on there, as a matter of fact. So
thank you, sir.
Yeah. So I mean, it's those are the ways. I mean, the YouTube has been very interesting. It's opened up a whole new audience. It's a different audience that listen to the podcast and subscribe to me. And I've had a lot of downloads on episodes that are not even that new right now. So it's been nice
Remarkable.
to have the archive going that way. So yeah, I mean, it's those are the best ways. And this weekend coming up on Byte, I'm going to feature Star Wars Celebration. Lucasfilm was kind enough to give me some interviews. So we'll have this weekend for sure. We're going to have the Ryan Gosling and Sean Levy announcement for Star Wars Starfighter.
Exciting.
Yeah, and coming up will be Sam Witwer, who talks about his Darth Maul series. There's people from Andor were there, and even though they'll get their own set of interviews, you're going to hear from them as well. And also that really fascinating series about ILM. Those people are going to be talked to. So it's going to be a lot of work for me, but I'll be editing those probably in a few days. And they'll be available Saturday and Sunday. Like everything is available at midnight. So you can download it right away.
Okay. And then, Tony, also talk about how people can support you and your work with Sci-Fi Talk Plus.
Yeah, Sci-Fi Talk Plus is something, excuse me, I've always wanted to do. How can you give a really better value to people instead of just the episodes? Well, number one, you don't have commercials. That's the good value. Number two, you do special episodes. And I've done longer versions of things and combined things into one and done stuff like that. But the company I work with, Supercast, has been phenomenal. And just recently, now you can incorporate videos with the audio. And not only can you listen online, but you can also listen on your phone and watch on your phone, which is great. So what happens is with every episode, well, let me give you an example. Coming up for Wonderla, the interview I did with Jeannie, you'll hear it as an audio interview, but also you'll see it as a video interview. And the video interview is going to feature some stills of her in character and also two clips from the series that are just absolutely wonderful with showcasing an amazing animation. So that's really the difference. You'll see when you subscribe and you get to your episode, you'll have an audio podcast. You'll see the trailer from Tron Ares, for example. You'll see, for example, the Superman CinemaCon sizzle reel is there. And then,
wow.
And then a series I used to do on YouTube is now exclusive to Plus. It's called Behind the Curtain, and it's basically interviews. Ideally, if I get the materials, it features stills, behind the scenes footage, clips from the movie, and also sit-down interviews with the actors. So I just finished one and that actually with the Byte this weekend on Sunday with Ryan Coogler's interview. You can on Plus you get the behind the curtain episode on Sinners, and that turned out really well. And that has everybody pretty much interviewed, and including Ryan. And there's a clip from the movie as well. It starts off with behind the scenes footage and it goes right into it, right with Michael B., and it continues from there. It's about 12 minutes. I try not to have them too long, but it's a good pace. It moves along really well. And I'm really proud of those. It takes a little extra effort, but I'm trying to have on Plus every episode to have a video content. And, it's like I just know that it's very expensive in fandom, not only to save money for conventions, not only to, have your streaming fix and have to subscribe to all these different things. So essentially what I've offered is a full year, that's totally free. That's your trial period. And you have a full year
that's amazing
to access everything and just watch everything. I mean, you can download everything if you want. And then after a year, I picked a super low price of $199 a month. And that's not just, hey, it's $199, then it goes up to $799. No, that's not the way I'm doing this. It's a forever price. So Is that going to last forever? No. but but I do want to, initially, as it's kind of like a different startup, initially as I just want to do this where once I feel like I have a good base of people that are watching and giving me feedback, not necessarily directly, but based on their downloads, then I can bump it up, after it's more popular, so that it makes it worthwhile for me. One of the series I have, it's called the Mix 100. It's 100 episodes that I only produce them, but I don't pick them. The subscribers pick them. So
Okay.
I'm actually doing that right now. I'm in the middle of it. I'm in the 50s starting right now, but it actually starts at number 100 and works its way up to number 1. So what ends up happening is at the end of each year, I look and see what gets downloaded the most. And then based on the numbers, I meticulously put together a list of 100 and then change it up where people can, it's like, hey, this is what you voted for. So, and the good thing is on my regular feed, I can only have like the Ryan Coogler interview and stuff like that for only a limited time. Then I have to take it off based on the studios allowing me to have it. However, on Plus, I don't have to do that because it's private. It's not going out to mass consumption. So because of that, those stay on. And some of those, like the Weta special effects artist that's coming up in the 50s for Planet of the Apes, he's on there. And I can't run that anywhere else, but I can run it there. So that's an extra bonus too.
Folks, I have just recently subscribed to Sci-Fi
Thank
Plus.
you so much. Thank you.
And I want to say it is worth it. If you are like me and you love behind the scenes material, this is how much of a behind the scenes geek I am. In the good old days of DVDs, the extended Lord of the Rings trilogy releases, I watched all of those appendices.
Yeah.
And I love that kind of behind the scenes. And Tony provides quality, in-depth information that you will not find anywhere else. And it is worth it, I can attest. Again, you get a free year trial, and then after that, $1.99 a month. You need to jump on that right now.
Yeah, it's not gonna cripple your pocketbook or wallet. So I mean, it's
Not at all.
It's more than fair. Some people think I'm even giving it away, but not really. No, it's just times are tough, and I recognize that. I have to credit the studios for making the material available to me, and I download it. They're in a very rough form. They're not as polished as you will see, and it takes a little bit of time to edit things, and then to also editorially pick out what the person is saying that makes sense. Good example, Michael B. Jordan's interview, because he plays twins. So, I mean, a lot of it was talking about Ryan Coogler, but then it's like, that's cool. And you guys do great work together, but he talked about each twin and what they're like. And it was like, that's the gold I want. So that's what I ended up using. And I was able to cut those together. So that's what he talks about. And you get an idea of his process to find these guys. And I thought it was fascinating how he got there. That's what I've learned.
Wonderful.
Everybody does things differently. There's no right way or wrong way. It's amazing.
Tony, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this chat.
Yeah.
And you taking time to come back to EYE On Sci-Fi Podcast to share all your exciting news. And folks, in the show notes of this episode, I'm going to include all the links where you can find Tony's podcast. Sign up for Sci-Fi Talk Plus. It is so worth it. And Tony, again, thank you, sir. And I wish you all the best on this exciting new rebrand and everything that you have coming down the pike.
Oh, buddy, thanks so much. I mean, I think the world of you, Rod. I really do. And the work
Likewise.
the work you do is just phenomenal. You opened up a whole world of stuff to me that I would have never seen on my own, and some great short films, not only live action, but animated. It's just incredible. And I would say if anybody has not subscribed to EYE on Sci-Fi, they should. And Rod's site is just a gold mine. If you want different entertainment that maybe falls underneath the radar a little bit, that's where you go. And some great short films that you can watch and great animated films. And it's just, and you talk to these people too, which is amazing too. So, God bless you and keep doing the great work. And you're on your way.
Oh, thank you, Tony. I appreciate that, sir. And you are always welcome back on the Eye on Sci-Fi podcast at any time.
It is my honor to be here, and I would love to come back anytime.
Take care.
Okay.
And there you have it, our special 250th episode featuring our very special guest, Tony Tellado, host of Exploring Humanity Through Sci-Fi. I encourage you to subscribe to his podcast if you consider yourself a fan of sci-fi, fantasy, and all other speculative genres, because Tony has been covering speculative media for over 20 years now, and his podcast has a wealth of information that you can dive into. And also, I encourage you to sign up for Sci-Fi Talk Plus. It is a great value, and you will get bonus content that you will not find anywhere else. So again, I thank Tony for taking time to have this discussion with me. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I thank you for joining me on our special 250th episode. So until next time, remember everyone to take a break, escape the mundane, and enter the fantastic. Take care.